Hello again, welcome everybody for the next chapter or two of Moby. So, every Friday I go live reading the next little bit of my book. Make sure you subscribe to me, follow me, and you'll see the rest of it. Right, so this is chapter 109, Ahab and Starbuck in the cabin. According to usage, they were pumping the ship next morning, and lo, no inconsiderable oil came up of the water. The casks below must have sprung a bad leak. Much concern was shown, and Starbuck went down into the cabin to report this unfavourable affair. Now, from the south and west, the Queeqeg was drawing nigh to Formosa and the Bashi Islands, between which lies one of the tropical outlets from the China waters into the Pacific. And so Starbuck found Ahab with a general chart of the Oriental archipelagos spread before him, another separate one representing the long eastern coasts of the Japanese islands, Nippon, Matsumae, and Shikoku. With his snow-white new ivory leg braced against the screwed leg of his table, and with a long pruning hook of a jackknife in his hand, the wondrous old man with his back to the gangway door was wrinkling his brow and tracing old courses again. Who's there? Hearing the footstep at the door and not turning around to it. Oh, Deck, be gone. Captain Ahab mistakes it. It is I. The oil in the hold is leaking, sir. We must up Burton's and break out. Up Burton's and break out? Now that we're nearing Japan, heave to here for a week to tinkle a parcel of old hoops. Either do that, sir, or waste in one day more oil than we make in good in a year. What we come 20,000 miles to get is worth saving, sir. So it is. If we get it. I was speaking of the oil in the hold, sir. I was not speaking or thinking of that at all. Begone, let it leak, and I'll leak myself. Aye, leaks and leaks. Not only full of leaky casks, but those leaky casks are in a leaky ship, and that's a far worse plight than the Queeqeg's, man. Yet I don't stop to plug my leak, for who can find it in the deep-loaded hull, or how hope to plug it, even if found in this life's howling gale? Starbuck, I'll not have the Burtons hoisted. What will the owners say, sir? Let the owners stand on Nantucket Beach and out-yell the typhoons. Who cares, Ahab? Owners. Thank you very much. Sorry about the wait. It's okay. Thou art always prating to me, Starbuck, about those miserly owners, as if the owners were my conscience. But look ye, the only real owner of anything is its commander, and hark ye, my conscience is in this ship's keel on deck. Got nice hot chocolate to drink. Lovely. Captain Ahab, said the reddening mate, moving further into the cabin, and with a daring so strangely respectful and cautious that it almost seemed not only every way seeking to avoid the slightest outward manifestation of itself, but within also seemed more than half distrustful of itself. A man better than I might well pass over in the what he would quickly enough resent in a younger man, and a happier Captain Ahab. Devils! Dost thou then so much as dare to critically think of me on deck? Nay, sir, not yet. I do entreat, and I do dare, sir, to be forbearing. Shall we not understand each other better than hitherto, Captain Ahab? Ahab seized a loaded musket from the rack, forming part of the most South Sea man's cabin furniture, and pointing it towards Starbuck, exclaimed, "There is one God that is Lord over the earth, and one captain that is Lord over the Queeqeg, on deck." For an instant, in the flashing eyes of the mate and his fiery cheeks, you would have almost thought that he had really received the blaze of the levelled tube. But mastering his emotion, he half calmly rose, and as he quitted the cabin, paused for an instant and said, "Thou hast outraged, not insulted me, sir. But for that I ask thee not to beware of Starbuck. Thou wouldst but laugh, but let Ahab beware of Ahab. Beware of thyself, old man." That's a good quote, isn't it? Beware of thyself, old man. He waxes brave, but nevertheless obeys most careful bravery that, whatever Ahab, as Starbuck disappeared. What's that he said? Ahab, beware of Ahab. There's something there. And then, unconsciously using the musket for a staff, with an iron brow, he paced to and fro in his little cabin, but presently the thick plaits of his forehead relaxed, and returning the gun to the rack, he went to the deck. Thou art but too good a fellow, Starbuck, he said lowly to the mate. Then, raising his voice to the crew, furl to gallant sails and close the top reefs fore and aft, back the main yard, up bartons, and break out the main hold. It were perhaps vain to surmise exactly why it was that, as respecting Starbuck, Ahab thus acted. It may have been a flash of honesty, or a more prudential policy which, under the circumstance, imperiously forbade the slightest symptom of open disaffection, however transient in the important chief officer of the ship. However, it was, his orders were executed, and the Burtons were hoisted. End of chapter. We'll read the next one as well. Yeah, we'll read the next one as well. So, what do you think of Ahab pointing the musket at Starbuck? Shows his state of mind, I guess, doesn't it? Right, chapter 110. Queeqeg in his coffin. Queeqeg in his coffin. Hope that's not too forbidding. Upon searching, it was found that the casks last struck into the hold were perfectly sound, and that the leak must be further off. So it being calm weather, they broke out deeper and deeper, disturbing the slumbers of the huge ground-tier butts, and from their black midnight sending those gigantic bowls into the daylight above. So did they go, and so ancient and corroded and weedy the aspect of the lowermost puncheons, that you almost look next for some mouldy corner cask containing coins of Captain Noah, with copies of the posted placards vainly warning that infatuated old world from the flood. Tierce after tierce, too, of water and bread and beef and shooks of stave and iron bundles of hoop were hoisted out, until at last the piled decks were hard to get about, and the hollow hull echoed underfoot as if you were treading over empty catacombs, and reeled and rolled in the air like an air-freighted demijohn. Top-heavy was the ship, as the dinnerless student of all Aristotle in his head. Well, it was that the typhoons did not visit them then. Now, at this time, it was my poor pagan companion and fast-bosom friend Queeqeg was seized with a fever, which brought him nigh to his endless end. Be it said that in this vocation of whaling, sinecures are unknown, dignity and danger go hand in hand. Until you get to be captain, the higher you rise, the harder you toil. So with poor Queeqeg, who, as harpooner, must not only face all the rage of the living whale, but as he is elsewhere seen, mount his dead back in the rolling sea, and finally descend into the gloom of the hold, and bitterly sweating all day in that subterraneous confinement, resolutely manhandle the clumsiest casks to see their stowage. To be short, among whalemen, the harpooners are the holders, so-called. Poor Queeqeg. Poor Queeqeg. When the ship was about half disemboweled, he should have stopped over the hatchway and peered down upon him where, stripped to his wooden drawers, the tattooed savage was crawling about amid the dampness and slime, like a green-spotted lizard at the bottom of a well. And a well, or an ice-house, it somehow proved to him, poor pagan, where, strange to say, for all the heat of his sweatings, he caught a terrible chill which lapsed into a fever, and at last, after some days' suffering, laid him in his hammock, close to the very sill of the door of death. How he wasted and wasted away in those few long lingering days, till there seemed but little left of him but his frame and tattooing. But as all else in him thinned, his cheekbones grew sharper, his eyes nevertheless seemed growing fuller and fuller. They became of a strange softness of lustre, and mildly but deeply looked out at you there from his sickness, a wondrous testimony to that immortal health in him which could not die or be weakened. Unlike circles in the water, which as they grow fainter expand, and so his eyes seemed rounder and rounding, like the rings of eternity, an awe that could be named, with steel over you as he sat by the side of this waning savage, and as strange things in his face as any beheld who were bystanders when Zoroaster died. For whatever is truly wonderful and fearful in man never yet was put into words or books. And the drawing near of death, which alike levels all, alike impresses all with a last revelation, which only an author from the dead could adequately tell. So that, let us say it again, no dying shall be or Greek had higher and holier thoughts than these, whose mysterious shades he saw creeping over the face of poor Queeqeg as he quietly lay in his swaying hammock, and the rolling sea seemed gently rocking him to his final rest, and the ocean's invisible flood tide lifting him higher and higher towards his destined heaven. Dear. Not a man of the crew, but gave him up. For as Queeqeg himself, what he thought of his case was forcibly shown by a curious favour he asked. He called one to him in the grey morning watch, when the day was just breaking, and taking his hand, said that while in Nantucket he had chanced to see certain little canoes of dark wood, like the rich warwood of his native isle. And upon inquiry, he had learned that all whalemen who died in Nantucket were laid in those same dark canoes, and that the fancy of them being so laid had much pleased him. For it was not unlike the custom of his own race, who, after embalming a dead warrior, stretched him out in his canoe, and so left him to be floated away to the starry archipelagos. For not only do they believe that the stars are isles, but that far beyond all visible horizons, and their own mild, uncontinented seas interflow with the blue heavens, and so form the white breakers of the Milky Way. He added that he shuddered at the thought of being buried in his hammock, according to the usual sea custom, tossed like something vile to the death-devouring sharks. No, he desired a canoe like those from Nantucket, all the more congenial to him being a whaleman, that, like a whaleboat, those coffin canoes were without a keel, though that involved but uncertain steering and much leeway adown the dim ages. Now, when this strange circumstance had been known aft, the carpenter was at once commanded to do Queeqeg's bidding, whatever it might include. There were some heathenish, coffin-coloured old lumber aboard, which, upon a long previous voyage, had been cut from the aboriginal groves of the Lackaday Islands, and from these dark planks the coffin was recommended to be made. No sooner was the carpenter appraised with the order than, taking his rule, he forthwith, and all the indifferent promptitude of his character, proceeded into the forecastle and took Queeqeg's measure with great accuracy, regularly chalking Queeqeg's person as he shifted the rule. "Ah, poor fellow, you'll have to die now," said the Long Island sailor. Going to his vice bench, the carpenter, for convenience sake and general reference, now transferringly measured it on the exact length the coffin was to be, then made the transfer permanent by cutting 2 notches at its extremities. This done, he marshalled the planks in his tools and to work. When the last nail was driven, and the lid duly planed and fitted, he lightly shouldered the coffin and went forward with it, inquiring whether they were ready for it in that direction. That's cheerful, isn't that? Overhearing the indignant but half-humorous cries with which the people on deck began to drive the coffin away, Queeqeg, to everyone's consternation, commanded that the thing should be instantly brought to him, nor was there any denying him, seeing that of all mortals some dying men are the most tyrannical, and certainly, since they will shortly trouble us so little for evermore, the poor fellows ought to be indulged. Leaning over his hammock, Queeqeg long regarded the coffin with an attentive eye, and then called for his harpoon, had the wooden stock drawn from it, and then had the iron part placed in the coffin, along with one of the paddles of his boat. all by his own request. Also, biscuits were then arranged around the sides within. A flask of fresh water was placed at the head, and a small body of woody earth scraped up into the foot, in the hole at the foot. And a piece of sailcloth was rolled up for a pillow. Queeqeg now entreated to be lifted into his final bed, that he might make trial of its comforts, if any it had. He lay without moving a few minutes, then told one to go to his bag and bring out his little gaunt yojo. Then, crossing his arms on his breast, with yojo between, he called for the coffin lid, hatch he called it, to be placed over him. The head part turned over with a leather hinge, and lay there Queeqeg in his coffin, with little but his composed countenance in view. Rarmai, it will do, it is easy, he murmured at last, and signed to be replaced in his hammock. But ere this was done, Pip, who had been slyly hovering near all this, drew near to him where he lay, and with soft sobbings took him by the hand, in the other holding his tambourine. Poor rover, will ye never have done all this weary roving? Where will ye go? But if the currents carry thee to the sweet Antilles, where the beaches would only beat with water lilies, will ye do one little errand for me? Seek out Pip, he's been missing long. I think he's in those far Antilles. If you find him, then comfort him, for he must be sad. For look, he's left his tambourine behind. I found it. Rig-a-dig-a-dig. Now Queeqeg, die, and I'll beat ye for your dying march. I have heard, murmured Starbuck, gazing down the scuttle, that in violent fevers men, all ignorance, have talked in ancient tongues, and that when the mystery is probed, it turns out always that in their wholly forgotten childhood, those ancient tongues have been really spoken in their hearing by some lofty scholars. So to my fond faith, poor Pip, all this strange sweetness of his lunacy brings heavenly vouchers of all heavenly homes. Where learned he that? But there. Hark, he speaks again, but more wildly now. Form 2 and 2, let's make a general of him. Oh, where's his harpoon? Lay it across here. Rig-a-dig-dig. Huzzah! Oh, for a gamecock now to sit upon his head and crow. Queeqeg dies game. Mind you that, Queeqeg dies game. Take a good heed of that. Queeqeg dies game, I say, game. But base little Pip, he died a coward, died all a shiver. Out upon Pip, hark ye if you find Pip, tell him the Antilles, he's a runaway, a coward. Tell him he jumped from a whaleboat, I never beat my tambourine over base Pip. I'll hail him general if you were once more dying here. No, shame upon all cowards, shame upon them. Let them go drown like Pip that jumped from the whaleboat. Shame. During all this, Queeqeg lay with closed eyes as if in a dream. Pip was led away, and the sick man was replaced in his hammock. But now that he had apparently made every preparation for death, now that his coffin was put to a good fit, Queeqeg suddenly rallied. Soon there... You alright? Just showing a stretcher.
My legs, I've got bad knees.
Alright.
If I sit for too long, it seize up and I can't bend. And I've got to get myself ready for going down the
Goodness,
stairs.
I see.
I find it hard to go downstairs and coming up. It's the steps down.
Dus met de koningparkjes weten.
See what happens. I've had 2 knee replacements and they seize up.
See if they'll send a plank or something to slide down on. I don't know.
That's a good idea.
I think it's a bit narrow to slide down that one.
Queeqeg suddenly rallied. Soon there seemed no need for the carpenter's box, and thereupon, when some expressed their delight and surprise, he, in substance, said that the cause of his sudden convalescence was this. At a critical moment, he had just recalled a little duty ashore, which he was leaving undone, and therefore had changed his mind about dying. He could not die yet, they averred. They asked him then whether to live or die was a matter of his own sovereign will and pleasure. He answered, certainly. In a word, it was Queeqeg's conceit that if a man made up his mind to live, more sickness could not kill him. Nothing but a whale or a gale or some violent, ungovernable, unintelligent destroyer of that sort. Now, there is noteworthy difference between savage and civilized. That while a civilized man may be 6 months convalescing, generally speaking, a sick savage is almost half well again in a day. So in good time my Queeqeg regained strength, and at length, after sitting on the windlass for a few indolent days, but eating with a vigorous appetite, he suddenly leapt to his feet, threw out his arms and legs, gave himself a good stretching, yawned a bit, and then springing into the head of his hoisted boat and poising a harpoon, printed himself fit for a fight.
Cheerio.
With a wild whimsiness, he now used his coffin for a sea chest, and emptying it into his canvas bag of clothes, set them in order there. Many spare hours he spent in carving the lid off all manner of grotesque figures and drawings, and it seemed that hereby he was striving in his rude way to copy parts of twisted tattooing on his body. And this tattooing had been the work of a departed prophet and seer on his island, who by those hieroglyphic marks had written out his body a complete theory of the heavens and the earth, and mystical treatise on the art of attaining truth, so that Queeqeg, in his own proper person, was a riddle to unfold. A wondrous work in one volume, but whose mysteries not even him could read, though his own live heart beat against them. And these mysteries were therefore destined in the end to moulder away with the living parchment, whereon they were inscribed, and so be unsolved at the last. And this thought it must have been which suggested to Ahab that the wild exclamation of his, when one morning, turning away from his surveying poor Queeqeg, "O devilish tantalization of the gods!" It's pretty good, isn't it? "O devilish tantalization of the gods." I like that. Do we have another chapter? Yeah, I think we can keep going for a few more minutes yet. Still got a bit of hot chocolate. This is only a page, this next chapter. Chapter 111, the Pacific. When gliding by the Bashi Isles, we emerged at last upon the great South Sea. Were it not for other things, I could greet my dear Pacific with uncounted thanks, for now the long supplication of my youth was answered. That serene ocean rolled eastwards from me 1,000 leagues of blue. There is, one knows not what sweet mystery about this sea, whose gently awful stirrings seem to speak of some hidden soul beneath, like those fabled undulations of the Ephesian Sodom of the buried evangelist St. John. And meet it is that over the sea pastures, wide rolling watery prairies and potters' fields, all 4 continents, the waves should rise and fall and ebb and flow unceasingly, for here millions of mixed shades and shadows, drowned dreams, somnambulisms, reveries that we call lives and souls, lie dreaming still, tossing like slumberers in their beds, the ever-rolling waves, but made so by their restlessness. To any meditative Magian rover, this serene Pacific, once beheld, must ever after be the sea of his adoption. It rolls the midmost waters of the world, the Indian Ocean and Atlantic being but its arms. The same waves wash the moles of the new-built Californian towns, but yesterday planted by the recentest race of men, and lave the faded but still gorgeous skirts of Asiatic lands other than Abraham, while all between float milky ways of coral isles and low-lying, endless, unknown archipelagos and impenetrable Japans. Thus the mysterious divine Pacific zones the world's whole bulk about, makes all coasts one bay to it, seems the tide-beating heart of earth. Lifted by those eternal swells, you must only own the seductive god, bowing your head to Pan. But few thoughts of Pan stirred Ahab's brain, as standing like an iron statue, as he at his accustomed place beside the mizzen rigging. With one nostril he unthinkingly snuffed the sugary musk from the Bashi Isles, in whose sweet woods mild lovers must be walking, and with the other consciously inhaled the salt breath of the newfound sea, that sea in which the hated white whale must even then be swimming. launched at length upon the almost final waters, and gliding towards the Japanese cruising ground, the old man's purpose intensified itself. His firm lips met the lips of a vice. The delta of his forehead's veins swelled like overladen brooks. In his very sleep, his ringing cry ran through the vaulted hull. Stern all, the white whale spouts thick blood. Like that. Stern all, the white whale spouts thick blood. There we go. All right, end of chapter then. Yeah, we'll have the next chapter next week, I think. So we've only got what, 70 pages to go. 80 pages to go. Out of that much, and we still haven't seen Moby Dick. I mean, for a title character, he's not often seen, is he? I suppose maybe that's where he should be. Maybe it's the long hunt. Maybe we are also ourselves hunting Moby Dick throughout the book, just as Ahab is. Anyway, watch all previous parts on the my reading playlist, or I think I've got a Moby Dick playlist as well. And soon, possibly after I've finished Moby Dick, which shouldn't be too long now, or possibly at the same time, I will also read Silas Marner. That's going to be my next book that I read. I'll continue reading. So I'll see you next Friday for that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Shitty rival.